Let's talk about peak caps. At the top of a gable or the peak of a gable, there's two ways you can do it. The first is to have two tracks come and miter together so that you have symmetrical lights, one on each side. The second way is to use one of our peak caps, which will place a light dead center at the bottom of the peak. We're going to talk about the peak cap kit now. Here's a finished peak cap. The peak cap channel is mitered to a point, sitting level over the gable. Three pieces of track come together and connect to the peak cap channel to create a perfectly centered center light. Here's how you do it. Keep in mind the following instructions are for use in doing a mounting track installation. The peak cap is designed to work with using mounting track for your top track in a gable. First, find the angle of the slope. Everything on this job comes off of one measure, so start there. There's two ways to get it. Use whichever you've got. You can use a digital angle finder and set it right in the peak and read the apex. If the angle finder reads, for example, 100, subtract that from 180 to get the turn, in this case 80. Then divide the turn in half to get your slope, which is 40 degrees. You can also use a speed square or a digital angle finder. Put the pivot point against the rake edge, swing the square until the body sits level, and read the degree scale. That's your slope. One caution on the square, read the degree scale, not the common pitch scale. The pitch scale tops out at 2012, which is only 45 degrees. A roof steeper than that runs right off the end of it. Either way, you get the same three numbers. Here's how to work with each number. If you measure the turn, you cut it in half for your slope and subtract it from 180 for your apex, the angle inside the point. If you measure the slope, double it for your turn and subtract that from 180 for your apex. If you use a slope finder or a speed square, that immediately gives you the slope. The main number you'll be working with is the slope. Now that you've got the slope, it's time to cut the channel. And this is where the slope measurement comes into play. The miter cut on the channel equals the slope. Most saws stop at 45, so if your slope comes in over 45, we have a workaround. We'll discuss that workaround at the end of this video. On a shallower roof where the slope lands under 45, set the saw to cut each side of the channel with the open side of the channel facing the fence at the same angle as the slope. Cut both halves, swing the saw opposite directions for the two sides. You're going to get something similar to this, except with pointed edges here and here. Now we need to make two relief cuts. First, we're going to cut the tips off, just like we have here. Cut about 1/4 inch down from the top and clip each one so that they fit better in the gable peak. The second relief cut, the right and left grooved lower edges. Clipping the groove track. Cut back the lower grooved edge at the corners so it clears the lower track channel. You can set the angle at 45 degrees, but do your best to only cut away the excess material beyond the lower points of the channel face. As you can see, this triangle comes down and creates a point right here. You want to cut across that point to cut away the excess material, but not chip the end or flatten that point. Only use a miter saw for this. Don't use tin snips. They'll crush these grooves and the brackets won't slide in. And now measure the length of track needed and cut. You measure across the triangle face at these lower points to determine how long of track that you need. Since you're measuring the track at the high point of the track, you can easily mark it right here on this front face and then cut in from there. So you're going to mark the distance between the edge of this point and cut from here to here. The track will be cut with the open side of the track facing the fence. The saw angled in to decrease the front face, and you mark the front face above the lights. You set the angle of this inside cut at 50% of the slope. Once finished, make sure the track snaps on and fits perfectly at that point. To recap, each of these cuts are mitered at the slope measurement you took from your roof. Then you clip off the top to allow a little more flexibility in the gable peak. Then you clip off these sharp edges starting at the point in. From there, you'll measure the distance between the two bottom triangle points and mark your top track. You'll align this track against the fence here and mark it at the exact width that you need these 2 points to be, and you'll cut in, making the front face shorter, 50% of your slope angle. So this, if your slope angle was 50, this would be a 25-degree cut, 25-degree cut. Dry fit it, make sure it's a perfect fit. Now it's time to dry fit, bracket, and level the center cap. At this point, before I take everything up, I'm going to install the brackets. The brackets will slide in under the grooves. The brackets slide in and can be adjusted back and forth once you get up to the peak top. They can also be bent to better align. As you can see here, this one flares out. You want to bend the brackets once you get up there so that they're in line with the gable slope. Now take everything up, install the brackets, and dry fit it to the peak. It should seat flat and sit level before anything gets screwed down. You might need to bend the brackets for a level fit. Use a small level tool like this to help the cap seat just right. Once you're satisfied with its positioning, fasten the brackets and check again. Screw the brackets in, mount them, secure the cap, recheck with the leveler. Often you will need to bend the brackets to get it level. Sometimes you might need to add a shim under a bracket to get it level. This cap's placement and how level it is critical for the whole assembly. Once you've got the peak cap installed and the brackets secured and level, go ahead and insert and install your top track. Don't worry about lights right now. We're going to dry fit things first and then go back to it. Once you've installed this, you might as well check again as it's still level. Now it's time to run the mounting track up on either side of the peak to meet this area. Once you've got the mounting track pulled in and flush with the interior mounting track of this part, the next step would be to get mounting track installed on either side of your gable. And now it's time to prepare the outer track to fit with this center track. Now that we've got our center cap secured with the brackets and the center track installed, now it's time to miter the inside cuts on our track that meets up with the top cap. The angle for those will be an inside cut. It'll be cut this direction, making the front face shorter. You will find your original slope and divide it in half. And that's where you'll set your blade to cut the track. You'll make the cut with the open part of the track against the fence and angle it in to cut this face shorter. Before installing lights, dry fit the top track. You can use a white marker to highlight any collisions between the two parts. Use tin snips to trim either side for perfect fitting. Repeat on both sides. Once you've got it fitted just right, then finally add the lights and install. It's good to install one full set onto the right track, then one light in the center, and then the rest can be used for the continued left track. A quick word on using peak caps with a bracket install. Once you've gotten this far and you've got your angles ready and you're ready to install and fit into your peak cap and your gable, you will use, if you're using an L bracket install, simply slide these in and you can install them, tuck them in. The important thing is this is creating some space so that everything lines up with the rest of your brackets down the line. If you're using a flat bracket install, you would do the same thing. Just grab a couple of flat brackets, throw them in here. Then you can tuck them under the softened fascia of your install, and this will provide the gap needed here so that the tracks coming up to it are the right planar angle to mate up correctly against this bottom track. Okay, this is the workaround for cutting your peak cap kit for roof lines that have a slope greater than your miter saw's ability to cut or to swing over and cut an angle. Let's say the slope of your roof is 50 degrees. The end goal here when you create the peak cap is you want this side and this side to be both at 50 degrees to match the slope of your roof. Since your miter saw can't do that, here's the workaround. The first thing you're going to need to do is build a simple jig. We did a 4x4, that way you've got plenty of room to nestle this against, so it doesn't have any room to tilt. It's got plenty of surface area to nestle against. We also measured it just long enough to go to the back of our fence, all the way to 1/4 of an inch before the blade strikes. This gives us a little bit of room so that when we're cutting our angle here, we're going to hit closer to this edge, the top edge of the grooves, rather than cutting through the grooves. We also added this metal plate in the back so that we could easily just throw it onto the fence, lock it down, and ready to cut really quickly. To make our first cut, the difference here is instead of cutting parallel to the fence, we're going to cut perpendicular. You're going to position this track so that the grooved edge is against your jig, just like so. And then you're going to do some math. As mentioned before in our sample scenario here, we've got a 50-degree roof slope angle. We're going to take 90 degrees minus 50, and that will be the first cut. So 40 degrees will be our first cut. We'll adjust our blade over to cut a 40-degree angle across the top of our perpendicular channel, just like so. We'll cut it up, and then we've got the first half of our cut done. Once that's done, you'll remove your jig. You'll reposition the track to place the freshly cut edge against the fence, line up the point of the previous cut exactly to where your blade's going to strike, and set your blade to cut at this angle. You're going to take your slope times 2 minus 90. In our case, it was a 50-degree slope, times 2 was 100, minus 90, that gives me negative 10. Forget about the negative, just go 10. So you'll adjust your saw to cut at a 10-degree angle with your channel freshly cut face against the fence, 10 degrees on the saw, lined up exactly to strike at the point of your previous cut, and cut across, and you now have a 50-degree angle on the right, 50-degree angle on the left, and you're ready to go on to the next steps of the peak cap preparation.